It is time for Season 5 in our NIU Dynasty and our first season in the Big Ten Conference. After losing to Michigan in the National Championship last season, Nick Yeast returns as our signal caller on offense, hoping to help us return to the playoffs. Halfback Zach Gertis saw solid playing time last year, filling in for an injured Jalen Poe, and he will be our #1 back this season. The wide receiver room is lacking some depth though, with our top senior Dwayne Cousins only being a 76 overall, but true freshman Thomas Hand looks to be a future star of this team headed forward for us in the future. Kevin Shaughnessy is returning for his final season with the Huskies, and true freshman Bryce Hainsey will see some solid time this year as well at the second tight end spot. Junior linebacker Kevin Coffey is the star of our defense and looks to have another big season this year for us, and our first ever 5-star recruit in this dynasty, Juan Rosario, will be starting for us at right outside linebacker. Unfortunately, we have no 5-stars currently to add to our Season 5 recruiting board, but we do have some 4-star gems, including tight end Nasir Meyer, left end Troy Duarte, right end Glenn Kenoy, and 3-star gem strong safety Derek Vons, and cornerback Jarius Cribbs. I screwed up the conference settings when I moved us to the Big Ten, so we're only playing 4 conference games this season, but it's still going to be a tough test as we are coming in ranked #2 in the nation and have to stay there. The first game of the season for the Huskies was on the road against Cal, and the defense had got this game off to a good start so far, and the offense was looking to follow suit. Down inside the red zone now, facing a 3rd and 7, Nick Yeast would throw to the left side, and Dwayne Cousins would convert, setting up now a 2nd and inches, but Nick Yeast couldn't escape pressure, facing now a 3rd and 1 as they would get to him again, but Coach Brooks would keep the offense out on the field, and the Huskies would convert. We're now on 1st and goal. It would be a halfback pitch to the sophomore Juan Branham, who would fight his way into the end zone, giving the Huskies their first touchdown of the day, but the Golden Bears would respond right back with a touchdown of their own. Neither team seen much offense in the first half, but the Huskies hoping to change that on this possession in the second, and as we say that, they would get stopped for a 3rd down, and Trent Butt would come out for a field goal, and the junior kicker would knock home his first field goal of the season for NIU. The defense would get a stop, forcing a field goal here from Cal, but they would go for a fake. The Huskies all over that. I don't know what the Golden Bears were thinking with that decision on 4th down, but their defense would come up with a stop and would need another one here on 3rd and 8, now giving their offense just over a minute to try to drive down the field to win this game. All they need though is a field goal to send it into overtime. Is on 3rd and 10. This would be thrown away, so this play would be for the game. Is on 4th and 10. Kevin Coffey knocks it incomplete, and the Huskies are gonna get a big time win here to start the season, thanks to a 2-touchdown performance from the sophomore back Juan Branham. The Huskies were at home for the first time this season, and they were hosting number 14 Kansas State in what was the game of the week. The Huskies would start out with the ball on the first possession, but their offense would go 3 and out, and Kansas State would waste no time getting down inside the red zone, where they would have one more shot to try to get to the end zone, but the Huskies would get a stop, forcing a field goal attempt here on 4th down, but Kansas State would miss it. A huge break there for the Huskies as they would take back over on offense with the game still tied at 0 apiece, and they had now found themselves down in the red zone, where on 1st and 10, Nick Yeast would be hit, and he would put the football on the ground, and Dominic Peely would pick it up for the Kansas State defense, and he would take this one all the way back untouched to the house for a touchdown. After that big defensive play, it wasn't long until Kansas State was up 14-0, and the Huskies now found themselves in a 2-possession hole here with under a minute and a half to go in the second quarter. Just short of a 1st down, the offense would stay out on the field, and Nick Yeast would pick up the 1st down on the quarterback sneak, resulting in a Zach Gertis touchdown, making this only a 1-possession game headed into the second half. NIU's first possession would stall out, so Trent Butt would knock home a field goal for them, and while it was still only a 1-possession game, they were only down by 4 points now and looking to strike. 1st and goal from the 7, it would be a play action as Nick Yeast would roll out to his right, and he would keep this on the run, fighting his way into the end zone. And with under 3 minutes to go in the game, NIU had finally taken their first lead of the day. After getting a 3rd down stop, all NIU had to do was keep this drive alive, but a failed 3rd down attempt would give the ball back to Kansas State with a minute and a half to go to get down the the field. A roughing the passer penalty on the Huskies defense didn't do them any favors as Kansas State was at the 15, but that third down pass would fall incomplete, so the Wildcats would tie it up at 17 apiece. With only 25 seconds left in the game, it was time to see if the junior Nick Yeast could get us down the field, and he was off to a good start after that pass completion to DeMarco Vernon as he'd find Kevin Shaughnessy, getting us down to the 28-yard line where we would hand it off to Zach Jaredis up the middle, who would fight his way forward, bringing it to the 13-yard line where Trent Butt would knock home this game-winning field goal, and the Huskies would just barely hold on in the game of the week to get a 20-17 victory over Kansas State to start the season here at home. Not only did we get the big-time win, but the Huskies, for the first time in this series, would be ranked number 1 in the country as well. Being ranked number 1 in the country and at home meant this game against unranked 0-2 Kennesaw State should be an easy win for us, but it wasn't looking like that. We started the game by turning the ball over to them, but thankfully the defense would get a stop and we were marching back down the field again. And Nick Yeast through these first couple of games was looking much improved from last season so far. Right as we say that, on 3rd and 5 from the 6, Yeast would connect with true freshman Thomas Hand for his first career touchdown reception, but the Owls of Kennesaw State were making this a good one. They were not going away easily against us, as on 2nd and goal with a little over 2 minutes remaining, they would tie it right back up. It was time to see if Nick Yeast could get our offense down the field and some more points before half. And after that completion to Kevin Shaughnessy, he would roll out to the right on the run, find Dwayne Cousins inside Kennesaw State territory, and it was looking like we could at least get a field goal out of this possession until our quarterback takes a crucial sack on that last play, taking us out of field goal range, and we would head to the second half against Kennesaw State, still tied 14 apiece. That was looking to change quickly on this first drive of the second half though, as Zach Jaredis would find the end zone, but once again Kennesaw State just wasn't going away without a fight. We were up by 1 possession with a chance to go up by 2 on 3rd and 6. Nick Yeast had what could have been the throw of the season so far, somehow fitting that in between 4 defenders perfectly, but Kevin Shaughnessy couldn't hold on to it. So Kennesaw State would get another chance on offense to try to go down the field to tie this game up, as Ali Joyner had the defense beat inside the 10, and that's a touchdown. The senior receiver from Illinois tying it up against his hometown team, as now Nick Yeast is going to put the football on the ground, and the Owls are going to take over with prime field position with a chance to go up over NIU again. The senior receiver Ali Joyner is just destroying the Huskies, but Nick Yeast strikes right back as he finds Dwayne Cousins wide open behind the entire defense, and it is now tied at 35 apiece with a minute and a half to go. The Huskies getting the big time stop on 3rd and inches will take back over, and this is a risky call to go for it on 4th down, but Coach Brooks trusts his offense as they pick it up no problem. Zach Jaredis down close to the 40. NIU getting close to field goal range, as on 2nd and 5, Nick Yeast going left side. That's completed to DeMarco Vernon to the 20, and this most likely will be the last play as Zach Jaredis takes this down inside the 10-yard line, setting up Trent Butt for a game-winning field goal 2 weeks in a row. And the Huskies survive a scare here against 0-2 Kennesaw State as they hold on for the 3-point victory, thanks in part to Nick Yeast having his biggest career game yet. Despite the win, we would fall behind on our first prospect of the season in 4-star left end Troy Duarte, so to try to get some interest back, we would schedule him for a week 6 visit against Marshall. Not only that, but we had lots of current players that were high risk of transferring this upcoming offseason too, and their reason for transferring is our play style on defense, and the only way we can change that is by allowing less passing yards per game. This next game for the Huskies should be an easy one, as they are at home taking on FCS West, and right away they found themselves down inside the 10-yard line as Dwayne Cousins would take this in for the first touchdown, and it was no surprise that the Huskies defense would come out and force a punt from the Royals. On the very next drive, for a brief moment it looked like they had Nick Yeast for a sack, but he would find Kevin Shaughnessy, and the Huskies would go up 14-0 and were looking to tack on some more points here before halftime. Nick Yeast had got them down to the 22, where on 2nd and 6 he would find Kevin Shaughnessy inside the 15, setting up this play from the 7, which was a halfback screen to Zach Jaredis, who would take this into the end zone untouched. NIU was expectedly starting to run away with this game as Nick Yeast would show off his legs to score a touchdown to start the second half, and this would be the first drive that the Huskies didn't score a touchdown on. So on 4th and 12, Trent Butt would knock home this field goal, and while we hadn't seen many highlights of them throughout this game, the defense had been doing their job all day long and would continue to do that as they would come away with an interception here against FCS. Just because they were up by 31 didn't mean the offense was going to slow down, as Nick Yeast would take off from the 18-yard line, would get a block and find his way into the end zone. And that would cap off this massive but expected victory by number 1 NIU 38-0 over FCS West here at home, thanks to another fantastic game from our junior quarterback Nick Yeast. Despite that win, we would end up losing out on Troy Duarte to Kansas State, and although it wasn't a big deal, we dropped down from number 1 to number 2 after Georgia beat number 15 Michigan 38-21. The Huskies were back in action as they were on the road taking on SEC opponent Mizzou, and the Tigers were moving the ball no problem to start this game against the Huskies, as on 2nd and goal from the 2, they would find the end zone first in tonight's matchup. The Tigers defense now was looking to get a stop against the Huskies offense, but on the 2 third downs they faced on this drive, the Huskies offense would pick them up no problem. They now found themselves inside the red zone as Zach Gerardis would take this down inside the 5-yard line, setting up 1st and goal from the 2, which would be a play action, and Nick Yeast would find Mitch Kuma wide open in the end zone, with the Huskies now finding themselves up 14-7 with just over a minute to go here before halftime, trying to put more points on the board. A late hit out of bounds on Nick Yeast would give the Huskies an extra 15 yards on that play, but the offense would stall out and they would be forced to punt it away. It would stay 14-7 headed into the second half of this game, and the Huskies would waste no time finding the end zone as the freshman Thomas Hand would haul this one in, putting the Huskies now up 21-15. They wouldn't be able to convert on that 3rd down, so Trent Butt would knock home this field goal, as it would now be up to the defense to try to stop Missouri as they would convert on 4th and 10. Now facing a 4th and 22 from the 47 as Braden Trimble would find himself deep past the NIU defense, hauling this one in, making it only a 2-point game with Missouri still having all 3 of their timeouts left to use. If they wanted any chance to win, they'd need a 3rd down stop here, but Zach Gerardis would pick it up for the Huskies, allowing Nick Yeast to kneel out the rest of the clock, and NIU would get the 24-22 victory over Missouri, as well as commitment from 3-star gem cornerback Jarius Cribbs. This week's matchup at home against Marshall didn't seem like it was an important one, but it was. The Huskies had 4-star receiver Bobby Clemens and 4-star defensive end Glenn Kenoy both visiting this week. Coach Brooks definitely wanted to make a good impression on the recruits, and it looked like that was happening so far as the Huskies would go up 14-0. Everything seemed to be going NIU's way to start this game, as on 3rd and goal they would go up 21-0, but in the second half, things started to change a little bit, and it would first start with this interception from Nick Yeast that would be taken back by the Thundering Herd inside the 30, and by the 4th quarter, Marshall found themselves down only by 1 possession. The defense was getting stops, but our offense had stalled out at this point, and we weren't doing ourselves any favors with penalties. That would give Marshall an extra 15 yards, getting themselves down inside the 12-yard line, and then on 1st and goal from the 2, the Thundering Herd would tie it up at 21. Nick Yeast had 2 minutes to get his team down the field now, but that was more than enough time from what we've seen from him this season. On 2nd and 7, just after crossing midfield, he would check down to Zach Gerardis, who would pick up a big chunk here, getting the Huskies down to the 20, but on 3rd and 2, Dwayne Cousins couldn't get the edge, and so the Huskies would be forced to settle for a field goal on 4th down. While they still got some points, this left just over 40 seconds for the Thundering Herd to get down the field to tie the game up, but we're now faced with a 3rd and 2 as quarterback Terrence Harper would be forced to throw this one away, but his team was still in field goal range as David Palacchio would come in and drill this field goal for Marshall, sending this game to overtime, where Marshall would start with the ball and Daquan Hunter would come away with an interception for the Huskies, meaning all we had to do was kick a field goal to win this game. We wanted to get as close as possible, so we would run the ball until we couldn't anymore, and from the 6-yard line, it was automatic for Trent Butt, giving the Huskies a 27-24 overtime victory, as well as commitment from 4-star receiver Bobby Clemens and 3-star strong safety Derek Vaughns. This was supposed to be another easy matchup for the Huskies at home this week, but we've seen how many of those games that were supposed to be easy weren't so far. This one was looking better though, as the Huskies only punted once in the entire first half, but in the second half, things started to get sloppy, even though we were up 24-3 as we had multiple turnovers against Texas State. Our defense started getting lax and let them drive down the field a little too easily against us, but in the end, it wouldn't matter as we got a 24-3 victory over them, as well as a handful of recruits after this game, including Glenn Kenoy, who visited last week, 4-star defensive tackle Ben McKethan, 4-star quarterback Russ Hicks, and 3-star wide receiver Jaquez Otis, but we would end up missing out on the recruit I wanted the most in Nasir Meyer, who committed to Louisville this week after his visit with them. Hopefully the Huskies could come out a little bit more dominant this week against the UL Monroe Warhawks, but it wasn't looking like we were off to that dominant start as the Warhawks were getting down the field no problem. They had a chance to take the lead on this drive, but thankfully our defense would come up with a stop, and then Nick Yeast would waste no time getting our offense down the field as he would roll out to his right and find Zach Gerardis for a touchdown. We would get the ball back before halftime, and our junior quarterback was trying to get us down the field with this great off-balance throw, setting us up with a 2nd and 2 as he would roll out to the right and take it himself for a touchdown. We were definitely playing much better than we did in the first quarter this game, as the second half would start out with a wide receiver pitch to DeMarco Vernon for a touchdown. By the start of the fourth quarter, sophomore quarterback Ben Merrill and the backups were in the game, and even our second string defense was seeing some action, and they were getting some big time stops for us as well. It was nice to see some of the younger players get some experience here before it was their turn next season, but most importantly, we got the dominant 38-7 win on the road. We also were finally starting to chip away at the lead of some of our late season recruits, as we had climbed up to 3rd on the list of 4-star gem Frank Connors, but still had a ways to go for 4-star gem Gideon Amati. It was time for NIU's first Big Ten Conference game of the season, and it was not off to a great start as Trent Butt would miss the opening field goal and Wisconsin would strike first today. The Badgers now had a chance to go up 2 possessions here on 3rd and 6, but Malik Cobb would come away with this interception for the Huskies defense, giving us a chance to tie it up on this possession, but Nick Yeast would take a sack, but that left us one more chance as on 3rd and goal from the 9, rolling out to the left, he would find Kevin Shaughnessy for a touchdown and would have less than a minute to try to get his team down the field again to get some more points to take the lead right before halftime. On 1st and 10 from the Wisconsin 27, Nick Yeast would avoid the pressure in the pocket and would find DeMarco Vernon, and with only 7 seconds left, this would have to be a shot to the end zone, but quarterback Dom Armour would pick it off for the Badgers, and the Huskies wouldn't walk away with any points, and it would be tied 7-all headed into the second half. Thankfully, our defense would start out with getting a stop against the Badgers offense, but we were faced with a 3rd and 12 after Nick Yeast would take a sack as he would roll out to the right, throw on the run, trying to find Kevin Shaughnessy. Initially ruled a first down, but a booth review would overturn that play, so we would have to settle for a field goal and would go up 10-7 over Wisconsin. A touchdown here could win the game for us, but Zach Gerardis would be stopped short, so we'd send Trent Butt out for a 20-yard field goal, but he would miss. That is so uncharacteristic from the junior kicker who had been so good for us this season, but with no points on that drive, that meant we needed to get a stop against the Badgers now. They were still short of midfield as they had a 3rd and 1, but this pass would be dropped, bringing up a 4th and 1. This could be for the game as the Huskies would get the stop, and despite their late game mistakes, they would hold on for the victory here at home, with Zach Gerardis putting up 110 yards on the ground today for the Huskies offense. Not much changed in recruiting other than us climbing up 1 spot on Gideon Amati's list, and since that was such a close game against unranked Wisconsin, we had fallen to number 3 in the nation, and somehow weren't even projected to have a first-round bye in the college football playoffs. The Huskies were back at home for their final game of the season here in DeKalb, and it was a good one as they were taking on number 17 Michigan State in the game of the week. Faced with quite a few 3rd downs in their opening drive, the Huskies were doing a great job of converting on offense, eventually finding themselves with a 1st and goal where Zach Gerardis would punch it in. This would be the first 3rd down of the day that the Huskies wouldn't be able to convert, and now their defense was looking to once again get a stop here against the Michigan State offense. Things were looking good so far for the Huskies on both sides of the ball, but it was still a low-scoring affair as Michigan State was moving inside their territory now, and what should have been a stop here on a 3rd and 8 halfback draw would turn into another 1st down. On 1st and goal, the Huskies defensive line would come up clutch with a stop, but they couldn't get lucky twice as on 2nd and goal, Michigan State would punch it in. They were pinned deep in their own territory, but Nick Yeast still had over a minute to try to get his team down the field, but being forced to punt the ball on that drive now gave Michigan State great field position. They would take full advantage of it as they would take the lead with 18 seconds left, and now being down by 7, the Huskies were trying to tie this game back up with their first possession of the second half. They would do just that as Zach Jardis would find the end zone for the second time today, and although Michigan State was driving, the Huskies defense would force a stop, and after forcing a field goal, Trent Butt would come out to tie it up, but would miss this kick. The past two games have been super uncharacteristic for our junior kicker, as his worst blunder coming in the last week's game against Wisconsin, missing a 20-yard field goal to try to help clinch us the game, so here we are down by 3 still. Coach Brooks still had full trust in his junior kicker though, as he would knock this one home, and we would head to overtime here in DeKalb, tied 17 apiece with number 17 Michigan State. After taking a sack, we were backed up to 3rd and goal from the 15, and the freshman Thomas Hand would get us down inside the 5, where Coach Brooks would stay aggressive and Nick Yeast would go right back to the true freshman for a touchdown. It was now up to our defense to try to get a stop against Michigan State, and the senior Deshaun Gibson would come away with an interception, and that would seal the deal for the Huskies here in DeKalb as they would get a 24-17 overtime victory, with Zach Jardis continuing to dominate the Big Ten defenses on the ground. That game of the week victory would move us up to the top school on Jameson's list, as well as Frank Connor's list, and we would move up to number 2 on Gideon Amati's list. The following bye week would see Jameson commit to NIU, and even though we fell down one spot behind Iowa to Frank Connors, we finally were on the top of the list for Gideon Amati. Not only was this a big game for the Huskies because Michigan was the number 1 team in the Big Ten, but because it was a rematch of last year's national championship, which the Huskies lost to the Wolverines in. They not only wanted a spot in the Big Ten Conference Championship this year, but they definitely had some revenge on their mind from last season, and the Huskies were off to a good start as they would go up 7-0 early on. Faced with a 3rd and 17, the Huskies defense had a chance to get a great stop here as Daquan Hunter would come away with an interception for the NIU defense, giving the offense now a chance to go up by 2 possessions as freshman Thomas Hand would take this inside the 5, and Nick Yeast would finish things off with a quarterback sneak. The Wolverines would respond with a touchdown of their own to make it a 1-possession game, but there was still over a minute and a half to go. Faced with a 3rd and 1, Nick Yeast would check it down to Zach Jardis out of the backfield, who would take this inside the 20, but on 2nd and 10, Yeast would take a costly sack, forcing us to settle for a field goal on 4th and 17, which would just squeak in, and it was looking like Trent Butt was back to his old self as he did not miss that field goal, and we had a chance to score again. Only up by 3, a touchdown here would be big for the Huskies as Nick Yeast would get it, making that his 3rd rushing touchdown of the game for the offense. We had a chance to make a big statement here if we could get a stop on 4th and 10, but Michigan would pick it up and would follow that up with 4th and 8, and this would be another 4th down conversion. That would lead to a Michigan field goal, and they would get a 3rd down stop using their first timeout, and we would be forced to punt the ball away, giving them a chance to tie this game up. Michigan had to move the ball 66 yards with under 2 minutes to go to tie this game up, but Kevin Coffey, our star linebacker, would come away with an interception, and with only 1 timeout remaining for Michigan, all we needed was 1 more first down, and we would get it, allowing Nick Yeast to run out the clock here, and the Huskies would get the close 24-17 victory over Michigan, with Nick Yeast having a fantastic day for the offense, and his 3 rushing touchdowns being the main reason we were able to win this one. We had 2 recruits left on our recruiting board, and we're still 2nd on Frank Connor's list, but thankfully had not fallen behind on Gideon Amati's list. As speaking of lists, the Huskies finally found themselves back atop of the top 25 rankings headed into the final game of the season. A win on the road against Indiana today would not only mean a perfect season for NIU, but it would also clinch them a spot in the Big Ten Conference Championship. Both of these feats would be monumental for this team under Coach Brooks, as it was their first season in the Big Ten Conference, and they had been turning heads all season long with their dominant play. While it was too early to tell, they were definitely the favorites to win the conference, but many critics had spoke up about the Big Ten this year with only a 4-game season, so even if they do win the Big Ten, there might be some controversy around it, as the Huskies really haven't had to play a full conference schedule this year. The true test will be next season, as things will be changing in the offseason for the conference, but now all the Huskies could focus on was what they had in front of them, and that was finishing this game out. Faced with a 3rd and 3, only up by 3, they needed at least a field goal here, but Zach Jardis would get them to the 1, and then it would be Juan Branham punching it in for the 2nd time today. Indiana's offense had no choice but to go for it on 4th and 6, and that would be Malik Cobb coming away with the interception for the Huskies, which would be a pick 6. And with this game out of reach for the Hoosiers, NIU just needed one more first down as Nick Yeast would kneel out the rest of the clock, and the Huskies would finish the season undefeated with a 34-18 road win against Indiana. Unfortunately, we would lose out on Frank Connors to Iowa, and Arkansas State jumped us to land 4-star Gideon Amati, as our recruiting class before the transfer portal would end as the 39th ranked class in the country. Despite that bad news, we had some good news, and that was we were playing Iowa in the Big Ten championship game next week. NIU had a chance to win the Big Ten championship in its first season as a member, and this game was going up against 7-5 Iowa, who had a notable loss to Eastern Michigan of all teams this season. Having lost to a MAC team in their schedule, hopefully this meant it should be an easy win for the Huskies today. But Iowa was off to a surprising start as they were up 14-7, looking to make it 21-7 until Kevin Coffey would come away with an interception for the NIU defense. This would give Nick Yeast and the offense a chance to get down the field and hopefully into the end zone before halftime with a minute and a half to go. But things weren't looking too great as on 1st and 10, Nick Yeast would take a sack. Now faced with a much more manageable 3rd and 6, would set up the halfback screen to Zach Jerdis, who would find himself down to the 10, where on 1st and goal, Nick Yeast would find the junior DeMarco Vernon, who would take this into the end zone untouched, and now had a chance to go up by a touchdown on our opening possession of the second half, as the freshman Thomas Hand would do just that for us, as we would now turn to our defense looking for them to get a stop on 3rd down against Iowa. The Hawkeyes down inside the 15, but we would get a big time sack, setting up 3rd and 18, trying to keep them out of the end zone. We'd get another sack. The freshman Damone Jennings with the big time play for the Huskies defense. And now up 28-17, we were one more defensive play away from winning this game. And with that incomplete pass on 4th down from Iowa, the Huskies would win the Big Ten championship in their first season a part of the conference. Not only would that win get us a Big Ten conference championship, but it would land Coach Brooks the Coach of the Year award, our offensive coordinator of the Year award, and sophomore Zach Jerdis would take home Best Running Back of the Year award. The Huskies would clinch a first-round bye in the playoffs and would be taking on the winner of the Texas Tech-Nebraska matchup, as the Cornhuskers would win that game and we'd be playing host to them in the Rose Bowl. The Huskies made it to the national championship last year and were looking to do so again this year in the playoffs, but that meant they first would have to go through Big Ten opponent Nebraska in the first round. This opening drive for Nick Yeast and the Huskies offense was looking good as they picked up multiple 3rd downs, but faced with another one here from the 9-yard line, Nick Yeast couldn't escape pressure, so Trent Butt would come out for the Huskies and get them on the board first. Melvin Smalls and the Nebraska offense was out on the field for the first time today, facing a 3rd and 5 that they would pick up no problem. Down to the 11, facing a 3rd and 8, Smalls back to throw, pressure coming, he would throw this one out the back of the end zone. And so just like the Huskies, the Cornhuskers would settle for a field goal. Just over 2.5 minutes to go in the first half, 3rd and 6, Kevin Shaughnessy inside the 5 for the Huskies, setting up a 1st and goal where it'd be a fake sweep. Zach Jerdis would get it up the middle for a touchdown. And now NIU looking to go up by 14, setting up a halfback screen to Zach Jerdis, again fighting his way into the end zone, as the Cornhuskers would respond with a touchdown on their opening drive in the second half, and we're looking for another one. A touchdown here would tie the game up as Deion Swaim would find his way in for the Cornhuskers. And what was once a 2-possession lead for the Huskies was now a tie ball game, with Nebraska looking to strike from the 4-yard line, and they would do just that. This game was far from over though, as there was still over 3 minutes to go in the game, and a great throw from Nick Yeast to Kevin Shaughnessy would tie this game back up at 24 apiece, giving Nebraska the ball back on 3rd and 6. Melvin Smalls would make an absolute dot of a throw to pick that up, and on 2nd and 18, another great throw would result in a first down for the Cornhuskers, as this drive stayed alive for them. That run from Deion Swaim would get them down inside the 5, and he would get the call again on 1st and goal. The redshirt junior giving Nebraska a 7-point lead with just over a minute to go in this first round game. This was not an unfamiliar situation though for junior quarterback Nick Yeast, as he has led multiple game-winning drives this season, and he was looking to do the same here as on 3rd and 1. Zach Jerdis got it up the middle, down to the 2-yard line, where Yeast would drop back to throw and find the freshman Thomas Hand. But Coach Brooks was keeping the offense on the field to go for the win here, as they would go right back to Hand, and it would be no good, requiring an onside kick now, which the Huskies would recover. That would give them one last chance to try to get down into field goal range to win this game, but Nick Yeast would be picked off by the Nebraska defense, ending this game in the Huskies' playoff hopes as Nebraska gets the thrilling 31-30 victory over the Huskies as they hoist the trophy and are headed to the second round. That obviously is not how we had hoped our season would end, and I don't know if it makes us feel better at all, but Nebraska would make the national championship as they would absolutely steamroll over #1 Arkansas 46-9 to win the college football championship. Nick Yeast saw a huge improvement from his first season as a starter as he threw for almost 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. Zach Jadis, winning Running Back of the Year award, had a fantastic season, running for 1,145 yards, 8 touchdowns, and averaged almost 5 yards a carry. I think the brightest spot of our offense going forward is Thomas Hand, the true freshman who had a fantastic season with 762 reception yards and 9 touchdowns for us. A little bit of a surprise here, junior Bernie Bragg led the team in tackles with 54 this year, and Juan Rosario, who started as a true freshman and was our first ever 5-star recruit, had a slow season, so I'm hoping to see a little bit more action from him next year. Not many players leaving this offseason, but most notably was senior tight end Kevin Shaughnessy and this past season's #1 receiver Dwayne Cousins. There was not a single recruit in the transfer portal higher than a 2-star that was interested in coming to NIU, so we wouldn't take in any transfers and ended with the 93rd ranked recruiting class in the country. Although we didn't bring in many players this offseason, we were developing the ones we had in-house, as for the first time in this Dynasty series, we had 2 players over 90 overall on the team. We also finally fixed the conference rules, so we will be playing a full conference season in the Big Ten next year. And we'll go more in depth in our recruits for season number 6, but I am super excited as we found a 5-star gem, Cole Pope, who will be trying to land next season. That'll wrap up season 5 as once again the Huskies, coming in as a top 5 team, will be looking to try to win the national championship here in season number 6.